Growing up, my mom would often tell me to make better decisions than she made. Being a single parent and raising two Black young men, college was oftentimes a conversation that came up a lot. And so when I applied to college and I got accepted, I started having to contend with this notion of being a first-gen student and also being queer and Black and trying to navigate my identity in a place that I didn't really know how to exist. And so when I got to college, I was extremely lost in my identity because I never knew anyone who looked like me or had had similar experiences like myself to help me walk through many of the challenges that I faced in my very first year. And so it became this struggle of contending with, how do I, as a Black man, make it in education? How do I, as a queer man, make it in education? How do I make it as a Black queer man in a place that I felt like I didn't really belong? And so after meeting so many people throughout my journey in education, I found that a lot of my experiences and a lot of the issues that I had as a queer man of color wasn't something that was being talked about in the classroom. And I would often raise my hand, or I would often bring up a point about how my experience didn't connect to experiences that were being shared. And oftentimes I felt silenced. I felt like folks didn't want to hear what I had to say about being a first-gen queer Black man. And so I started looking for outlets. I was looking for a place where I could truly belong and trying to find people who looked like me or walked like me or lived similar experiences like myself. And it was very difficult to find that. It was extremely difficult to find that. And so, taking the advice of some of the folks who knew me, I started to get involved. And I told myself that I was going to seek out opportunities that could help me not only grow as a scholar, but also help me understand the intersections of my identity. And even in those moments, the opportunity for me to have the conversations or to have the space to engage around issues of my queer Black identity weren't there. And I spent a lot of time crying, or I spent a lot of time by myself, or I spent a lot of time searching for people who I felt like I could connect with. And even in those moments, I still felt ostracized. And so a lot of the work that I needed to do, not only as an undergraduate student, but as someone who knew their own tenacity, it just became a daily routine of having to work on myself. Every day became a challenge of becoming a better person. So even when I felt like I was at my best scholarly, or that I was making all of the right decisions, imposter syndrome as a queer Black man constantly kept coming back around. And folks kept asking me, are you gonna go get a master's degree? Do you ever see yourself as a doctor? Do you see yourself going to get a greater education? And I struggled because I never saw myself as smart. I was never told I was smart. I was never given an opportunity to prove that I knew something or that I truly could do what I wanted to do. And so it became a challenge of, how do I make it in a world that is telling me that I don't belong here? And then how do I make it in education in a place where my experiences are not mirrored? And so when I did achieve my master's and I did go on to work on my doctorate degree, I started learning not only about myself, but about those who are around me, that my story was mine to tell, and that I needed to speak up about the needs of queer men of color. And I wrote about it, and I talked about it, and I traveled, and I told folks that I was going to be the voice that lifted myself up, and that I was going to use my voice to tell the other stories of other queer men of color who experienced the same experiences I did in education.